The aroma of rosemary chicken wafted through the house like an invitation. Gina Jones had spent the entire afternoon preparing the meal, humming to herself as she set the table with her best china. The wine glasses gleamed under the chandelier's soft light, and her pearl necklace matched the gentle ivory tone of her blouse. Everything had to be perfect. After all, tonight was special. Her only son Liam was bringing someone home. Someone special, he'd said over the phone, his voice carrying a certain vibrance she hadn't heard in a while. Gina had imagined a young woman with manners, grace, perhaps someone from a good family. Maybe even someone she already knew. She didn't dare ask too much, she wanted to be surprised. And tonight, she would be. She adjusted the silverware one last time and took a step back to admire the table. Candles flickered, casting a golden hue over the room. It felt festive. Welcoming. Then the doorbell rang. Her heart skipped. Gina smoothed down her skirt and approached the door, pausing briefly to check her reflection in the hallway mirror. She looked good. Calm, warm, inviting. She opened the door. There he was, Liam, her baby, now a man of 28, tall and broad-shouldered with the same sandy hair and soft hazel eyes as his father. But it wasn't Liam that made Gina's breath catch. It was the girl holding his hand. Claire Jones stood with a smile, her deep brown skin glowing in the porch light. Her black curls framed a heart-shaped face, and her eyes were kind. She wore a soft lavender blouse and jeans, casual but respectful, and extended her hand with confidence. "Hi, Mrs. Jones. I'm Claire. It's so nice to finally meet you." Gina froze. Her smile vanished. It was barely a blink of a moment, but Liam noticed. Claire noticed. Gina's hand didn't move to accept Claire's. Instead, her eyes snapped to Liam. "Can I talk to you for a second?" she said, voice thin and tight, the strain making it sound like it might snap at any moment. Liam stiffened. "Mom." "Just for a moment," she insisted, stepping aside and gesturing him into the kitchen. Claire stood awkwardly in the entryway. The tension was palpable, like the room had been drained of all warmth. Gina didn't wait for a response. She turned sharply and walked toward the kitchen. Liam followed, jaw clenched. "What the hell, Mom?" he whispered, as soon as they were out of earshot. Gina spun to face him, barely containing herself. "You didn't tell me she was." "What?" Liam snapped, his voice a low growl. "Black," she whispered harshly, the word tumbling out like poison. "Liam, she's not like us." Liam stepped back, stunned. "Not like us? You know what I mean." "I don't think I do." Gina's hands shook slightly as she fidgeted with the edge of the counter. "You know how people will talk. This is a small town, Liam. People notice things. This is going to be hard for you." "No, it's not," Liam said, his voice rising. "It's only hard for you." Back in the dining room, Claire remained still, hands clasped politely in front of her. She could hear everything. Gina lowered her voice. "I'm just trying to protect you. This won't work in the long run. She's not one of us." There was a pause so long it felt like the house itself held its breath. Liam shook his head. "Then maybe I'm not either." He turned around and walked out of the kitchen. "Liam, wait," Gina called out, but he was already moving toward the door. Claire gave him a sad, knowing look as he reached for her hand. She didn't ask what was said. She already knew. Her face remained composed, but her eyes glistened with unspoken hurt. Liam opened the door. "Have you subscribed to our channel yet? Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. You're really going to leave?" Gina called from behind, her voice trembling. He looked back once. "I thought you raised me better than this." Claire followed him out. The door slammed shut behind them with a thunderous finality that echoed through Gina's chest like a shot. She stood there, staring at the door, heart hammering against her ribs, her breath shallow. Everything she'd prepared, the candles, the food, the pearls, all of it sat behind her like decorations at a funeral. The evening she'd envisioned had just been reduced to ashes. Gina wandered back to the table, dazed. The candles flickered innocently, still casting that soft glow. The wine chilled in its decanter, untouched. She sat down slowly at the head of the table, the silence heavier than she could bear. She thought of her husband, long gone now, who had always told her, "Judge people by their heart, not their skin." She had nodded back then, said she understood, said she agreed. But clearly, something had been buried in her all these years. A wall. A fear. An ugly shadow of bias she'd never wanted to name. She pressed her fingers to her temples. What had she done? Outside, Liam and Claire walked slowly down the quiet street. A chill hung in the air, but neither of them spoke for several blocks. "I'm sorry," Liam finally said. His voice was low, laced with shame and anger. Claire looked up at him. "Don't apologize for her. I didn't think she'd react like that." Claire nodded, then paused. "It's not your fault." They stopped at a park bench under a flickering street lamp. Liam sank onto it, staring at his hands. Claire sat beside him, close but not touching. "I never expected this," he murmured. "It's okay, Liam," Claire said softly. "I love you." His eyes met hers. "I love you too." Then he smiled sadly. "We'll get through this together." Back at the house, Gina sat alone. The food on the table had gone cold. She stared at the candles, still flickering as if mocking her in a room now steeped in silence. With hands clenched and jaw set tight, she felt no guilt. Only betrayal. By her son in her own home. Brought that girl into her sanctuary like it was no big deal. Like it was normal. Like it was acceptable. She blinked hard, her eyes dry. She wouldn't cry. Wouldn't waver. Not now. Not ever. If Liam wanted to throw away everything, for her, then maybe he wasn't the son she thought he was. She stood abruptly, the chair legs scraping harshly against the polished wood floor. The sound startled her, but she didn't care. She walked to the table, picked up a plate, and dumped it into the sink with a sharp clatter. One after another, she cleared the table with cold efficiency. Not mourning the night, but erasing it. Erasing them. She wouldn't be made to feel ashamed in her own home. Not by anyone. Not even her son. And certainly not by her. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Gina Jones sat down on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, eyes fixed on the last message she'd sent. "We need to talk. Alone." No salutation. No apology. No emoji to soften the edge. Just 5 clipped words, typed with trembling fingers before the anger could cool into regret. The silence that followed was louder than she liked. But eventually, the message was marked read, and she knew Liam would come. He was a good son. Raised well. He respected his mother. He always had. He'd come, and she'd speak to him like a mother should, like she had a right to. He'd see reason. He'd come to his senses. The knock came just after 10. Not a timid knock. A firm one. Purposeful. Gina opened the door, her face set in stone. And there he was, her son, standing tall but tense, wearing the same jacket as last night, dark circles smudged under his eyes like he hadn't slept. "Thanks for coming," she said stiffly, stepping aside to let him in. But Liam didn't move. "I'm not staying long," he said. "What do you want to talk about?" Gina's eyes flicked past him. That's when she saw the car idling at the curb. The engine was off, but the driver's side door was open, and Claire was sitting there, hands folded on her lap. "You said alone," Liam added. Gina's lips thinned. "So why is she here?" "She didn't want me walking into this alone. I asked her to wait." "You should have come by yourself," Gina snapped. But something inside her twisted, a knot of anger and something else. Defiance. The girl was just sitting there, calm as can be, like she had every right in the world to be here. Like this was normal. Without a word, Gina brushed past Liam and marched down the steps, her heels cracking sharply against the concrete. Her cardigan flared behind her like a cape. Liam sighed. "Mom." But she was already halfway down the driveway. Claire saw her coming and stepped out of the car, closing the door gently behind her. She stood tall, not defensive, not combative, just present. Her posture was respectful, her eyes steady, her voice soft. "Mrs. Jones," she said. "I just wanted to." "Don't you dare call me that," Gina spat, eyes blazing. Claire's expression shifted, just slightly. Not fear, not anger. Something more complex. A hurt that had been felt before. A hurt she was prepared for. Gina pointed a finger at her, shaking with rage. You think you can seduce my son? Just waltz in here with your sweet smile and your calm voice, thinking you can worm your way into this family. Claire inhaled deeply, but her voice remained steady. I love Liam. I hoped we could talk. Find some peace. Gina barked a bitter laugh. Peace? She sneered. The only peace I want is you gone. Back to your own kind. You don't belong here. You never will. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. That's when the front door slammed. Liam came barreling down the steps, fury in every step, his voice cutting through the still morning. That's enough, Mom. Gina spun around. No, it's not enough, she snapped. You've lost your mind. This is who you're willing to throw your life away for. Liam stood beside Claire now, placing himself firmly between the two women. She's not this. She's Claire. And yes, I would. 100 times over. She's using you. Gina shrieked. Open your eyes. You want me to open my eyes? Liam's voice trembled with restrained rage. Fine. Let me tell you what I see. He stepped forward, his voice rising. I see a woman who taught me to treat everyone with respect, unless they look different. I see a mother who says she raised me with values, but only when they align with her prejudices. I see someone I loved more than anything, trying to destroy the one person who makes me feel whole. Gina's face contorted. You break it off with her, she said, her voice shaking now, not just with anger but desperation. Or you're no longer my son. The words fell from her mouth like stones. For a moment, everything was still. A bird chirped somewhere far away. A breeze stirred the trees. Liam blinked once. And then, slowly, he nodded. If that's the choice, he said quietly, then I'm done. Gina stumbled back as if she'd been slapped. You don't mean that. I do, Liam said. And I think you always knew I would. He took Claire's hand. Her fingers were trembling, but she didn't cry. She held his hand with strength, not weakness. They turned, walked toward the car. Liam. Gina called out. He paused but didn't turn around. This is just a phase, she pleaded. You'll see. You'll come back. But Liam opened the car door. Claire got in first. He followed. And then they were gone. Gina stood in the driveway, alone. The wind tugged at her cardigan, and her arms folded instinctively across her chest. She didn't go back inside right away. She just stood there. Stunned. She told herself it was all just heat of the moment. That he'd call in a few days, apologize, say he was wrong. Say he missed her. That he'd come back to his senses. That he'd come back home. But days passed. And he didn't. That night, Gina sat at the kitchen table, her phone lying face up in front of her. No texts. No missed calls. Just silence. The same silence that had echoed through the house since Liam walked out the door. She made dinner. She only made enough for one. The chair across from her sat empty. A folded napkin rested beside an untouched fork. Habit, she thought. Muscle memory. She ate in silence, chewing slowly, eyes staring blankly at the wall. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Her son had always listened. Always loved her. Always obeyed. But not anymore. She had drawn the line in the sand. And he had crossed it without hesitation. She told herself she'd done the right thing. That she was protecting her family. That Claire wasn't right for him. That Liam would regret it all. Eventually. But late that night, as the candles burned down to wax puddles and the house creaked with loneliness, Gina stared at the front door. And told herself again, he'll come back. But deep down, beneath the anger, beneath the pride, beneath every stubborn wall she'd built around her heart, a single, terrifying thought flickered. What if he never does? 2 years. That's how long it had been since Gina Jones last heard her son's voice. Not a phone call, not a voicemail, not a card on her birthday. Just silence. She told people he was traveling for work. Very busy, she'd say with a smile too practiced to be questioned. You know how it is, he's always had that adventurous streak. Her friends would nod sympathetically over coffee at the country club, or during book club meetings where the talk of children was always inevitable. They'd envy her worldly son, and Gina would soak up their admiration like sunlight, until she was alone again. Alone with the lie. Because Gina knew exactly where Liam was. And who he was with. Every night, once the house was quiet and the lights dimmed, she would reach for her phone and scroll through his Facebook page. She'd never dare send a message, never comment, never even like a post. That would break the wall she'd built. And she wasn't ready for that. But she looked. She watched. Photo after photo, Liam and her, always together. Claire, with her radiant smile and those expressive eyes. Liam looked different in the pictures. Lighter somehow. More alive. He laughed more than Gina remembered, touched Claire like she was something sacred, smiled like he was exactly where he was meant to be. It gnawed at Gina. Every single night. She didn't know what hurt more, the fact that he looked happy, or that he didn't look like he missed her at all. One Friday evening, while heating leftovers in the microwave, Gina's phone vibrated on the counter. She almost didn't look, probably another spam call, or one of those fitness challenge group chats she never replied to. But something about the screen caught her eye. It wasn't a message. It was a tag. Her heart stuttered. She tapped the notification. The app opened to a single post shared by a mutual friend. Congratulations to Liam and Claire on their engagement. Hashtag Black Love hashtag just said yes hashtag forever starts now. Gina stared, frozen. The image was stunning, professionally shot. A soft, sun-drenched field, Liam down on one knee, holding out a glistening diamond ring as Claire gasped, one hand over her heart. Her curly hair cascaded in the golden light. Liam's face was full of emotion. Raw. Real. The next photo showed Claire leaning down to kiss him, the ring now on her finger, sparkling like it had always belonged there. Thousands of likes. Hundreds of comments. People gushing over how beautiful they were. How happy they looked. How perfect they were together. Gina's hand began to tremble. She could barely breathe. She closed the app. Then opened it again. Scrolled. Zoomed in on their faces. Zoomed out. Scrolled again. No. She gripped the edge of the counter. No. This couldn't be real. Not like this. Not this far. She had always thought, hoped, that he'd come to his senses. That this was some youthful rebellion, some mistake he'd eventually regret. That he'd remember who he was. Where he came from. That he'd come home. But there he was. Proposing to her. Choosing her. Forever. Gina's phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. The screen didn't crack, but something in her did. She's taken him from me, she whispered aloud, her voice barely audible over the microwave's hum. It wasn't just hurt. It was rage. A deep, twisting ache that curled through her stomach and tightened like a noose around her chest. She had stolen him. She had won. And Gina had lost. That night, she didn't eat dinner. She didn't turn off the microwave. She just sat in her dark kitchen, the phone on the floor beside her chair, the engagement photo still glowing on the screen. She didn't cry. Not yet. Gina Jones didn't cry easily. Not even when her husband passed away. She had been proud of her strength, her composure, her ability to push through the unbearable and act like it didn't pierce her. But tonight, the silence wasn't just quiet. It was punishment. And it was self-inflicted. Over the next few days, the engagement announcement spread like wildfire. People Gina hadn't spoken to in years texted her, messaged her, even called. Did you hear the news? Congratulations to your son. What a beautiful couple. Gina deleted most of the messages before reading past the first line. She couldn't handle it. The idea of anyone celebrating this, her son marrying that girl, felt like betrayal. But she couldn't stop the pictures. They flooded her timeline. Smiling. Dancing. Claire showing off her ring. Liam hugging her from behind. captioned with things like "My forever person" and "Love wins." Gina wanted to scream. Instead, she closed the app, tucked her phone into a drawer, and didn't open it for 3 days. On the third night, after the house grew too quiet and the wine in her glass had long gone warm, she finally cracked. It started with just one picture. The one of Liam and Claire lying in a field, heads close together, laughing with abandon. It wasn't posed. It wasn't polished. It was real. And Liam, her Liam, looked free. Gina pressed a hand to her mouth, as if trying to push the tears back inside. But they came anyway. For the first time in years. Not because of Claire. Not because of the engagement. Not even because Liam hadn't called her. But because in that moment, she realized something she hadn't allowed herself to admit. Liam hadn't been taken. He'd left. He'd chosen. And she had made that choice easy for him. The call came on a quiet Sunday morning. Gina was slicing peaches in the kitchen, trying to busy her hands so her mind wouldn't wander back to them, to him, when her phone buzzed across the granite counter. "Hey, did you see the pictures?" It was her cousin Patrice. Never one to beat around the bush. Gina frowned, placing the knife down. "Pictures?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. The kind that stretches too long, too heavy. "Oh," Patrice said slowly. "I thought you knew. I mean, it's all over social media. I assumed Liam told you." Gina's breath caught in her throat. "Told me what?" "They got married yesterday," Patrice said gently. "Liam and Claire." The words dropped like a stone into Gina's stomach. She blinked. "What?" It was small. Very elegant. Outdoor garden venue. Looked beautiful. Claire wore this satin gown with lace sleeves, real vintage look. Liam looked so happy. "I didn't mean to. I thought you'd already. Gina, are you okay?" But Gina had already hung up. She stood motionless in the middle of the kitchen, phone still in hand. The knife was still resting beside the half-sliced peaches, the sweet scent suddenly too much, too sharp. He got married. He got married without telling her. Without inviting her. Not even a text. She hadn't known the date. The time. Nothing. It was done. Final. Over. Her baby boy, her only son, her only child, had made one of the most important decisions of his life, and he had made it without her. Tears threatened, but they didn't fall. Instead, her chest burned, hot with something uglier. Sharper. Rage. It surged through her like wildfire, igniting every bitter ember she tried to smother over the last 2 years. She swept the fruit bowl off the counter. It shattered on the floor, apples and pears bouncing wildly, one rolling under the fridge. Gina barely noticed. She paced the kitchen like a storm cloud trapped indoors, her heels clicking sharp and fast against the tile. How dare he? How dare he marry that girl and not even tell her? After everything she'd done for him, every sacrifice, every night she sat up worrying, every soccer game she drove to, every scraped knee she kissed, this was how he repaid her. No ceremony. No warning. No seat at the table. She clutched the edge of the countertop, her knuckles white. "He's no longer my son." The words bubbled up unbidden, boiling from the pit of her stomach. She said them aloud. "He's no longer my son," she repeated, slower this time. Then again, "He's no longer my son." But each repetition grew less certain, less convincing. And finally, as she stared down at the broken fruit bowl and the wineglass she'd left from the night before, something inside her cracked. She walked to the cabinet, pulled out a bottle of red, and poured herself a glass with a shaking hand. The cork rolled across the counter, forgotten. She took a long sip. Then another. "He's no longer my son," she muttered again, a whisper now. But this time it felt hollow. Not empowering. Not righteous. Just empty. Because the truth was, it wasn't that Liam had been taken. It was that she had pushed him away. It hadn't been Claire standing at the threshold of their home with hostility in her eyes. It had been Gina. Claire had come with warmth, with an open heart. And Gina had slammed the door. Liam hadn't turned his back. She had. The clock on the wall ticked louder as the silence thickened. Outside, the trees swayed in the spring breeze. Birds chirped. Somewhere down the street, a lawnmower hummed. But inside the Jones house, it felt like time had stopped. She thought of all the things she would never see. The vows. The first dance. The way Liam probably smiled when he saw Claire walking down the aisle. The toast someone probably made in his honor. The way he laughed. The joy on his face. Her son. She should have been there. Should have stood in the front row. Should have watched him marry the woman he loved. Even if that woman wasn't who Gina had imagined. Even if she didn't understand it. Even if it hurt. That was what mothers were supposed to do. They were supposed to show up. But she hadn't. And now, she was on the outside. Peering in through a screen. Watching a life unfold without her. The wine dulled the sharp edges, but it couldn't silence the ache. She sat at the kitchen table and picked up her phone again. The engagement photo was still there. Now it had a new caption. Now and forever, April 5, 25. It had only been 24 hours. 24 hours since he became someone's husband. Since she became part of the family. And Gina? She had made herself a stranger. She thought about texting him. Just one message. But her fingers hovered above the keyboard, motionless. What would she even say? Congratulations? I saw the pictures. I wish I had been there. No words seemed big enough. Or small enough. Or safe enough. So she put the phone down. And poured another glass of wine. The evening sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the tile floor. The scent of peaches still lingered faintly in the air, sweet and sad. Gina sat there for hours. Thinking. Regretting. Remembering. Not just the fight. Not just the door slam. But before. Liam as a baby, curled against her chest. His laugh when he lost his first tooth. The way he used to run into her arms after school, backpack bouncing behind him. She had loved him with her whole heart. But somewhere along the way, that heart had hardened. Had calcified around her fears, her pride, her old, inherited beliefs she never questioned until it was too late. And now? Now there was no invitation. No seat at the table. Just silence. And the echo of her own words. He's no longer my son. But it didn't feel true anymore. Not at all. The drive to her sister's house was supposed to be a brief escape, a chance for Gina to clear her mind from the storm of emotions that had been brewing since she learned of Liam's marriage. The sky mirrored her mood, overcast and brooding, with rain tapping relentlessly against the windshield. The road stretched ahead, lonely and winding. Trees blurred past as Gina's thoughts spiraled. How had it come to this? Her own son, married without her blessing, without her presence. The sting of exclusion gnawed at her, blinding her to the slick sheen forming on the asphalt. A sharp curve approached, but Gina's mind was elsewhere. The tires lost their grip, and in a heart-stopping instant, the car skidded. She yanked the wheel, but it was too late. The vehicle spun, a sickening dance of metal and momentum, before crashing into a ditch. Silence followed. The world seemed to pause, save for the rhythmic drumming of rain on the crumpled hood. Pain radiated through Gina's body, sharp and unrelenting. She tried to move, but a searing sensation in her leg pinned her in place. Panic set in. The road was deserted, the storm concealing her plight from any passers-by. Darkness edged her vision as she fought to stay conscious. Headlights pierced the gloom. An SUV slowed, then stopped. Doors opened, and hurried footsteps approached. "Ma'am? Can you hear me?" A deep, calm voice broke through her haze. Gina blinked, focusing on the figures now beside her. A man and a woman, both African American, their faces etched with concern. Behind them, 3 children hovered, their eyes wide with worry. "We're doctors," the woman said gently. "I'm Dr. Trudy Thomas, and this is my husband, Dr. Turner Thomas. We're here to help." Gina's mind swirled with conflicting emotions. Here she was, vulnerable and in need, being rescued by the very people she had harbored prejudices against. Shame flushed her cheeks, but pain quickly overshadowed it. "We need to get you to a hospital," Dr. Turner said, his tone leaving no room for argument. With practiced efficiency, they stabilized her as best they could, their touch both professional and compassionate. The children assisted, fetching supplies from the SUV, their youthful faces reflecting a maturity beyond their years. The journey to the hospital was a blur. Gina drifted in and out of consciousness, each jolt sending fresh waves of pain through her battered body. Yet through the fog, she felt a reassuring hand clasping hers, small, delicate and warm. Days melded together in the sterile confines of the hospital. Machines beeped in rhythmic patterns, a constant reminder of her fragility. Yet, amidst the clinical coldness, warmth blossomed. The Thomas family became her steadfast companions. Dr. Trudy, an esteemed orthopedic and trauma surgeon, took personal charge of her care, ensuring Gina received the best treatment possible. Her husband, Dr. Turner, a renowned cardiologist, frequently checked in, offering both medical advice and comforting conversation. Their children, Tim, Gabriel and Mandy, brought life into the dreary hospital room. Mandy would sit by her bedside, reading stories or simply chatting about her day. Gabriel brought fresh flowers, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the white walls. Tim, the eldest, would share jokes, coaxing reluctant smiles from Gina. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the room in hues of gold and crimson, Gina found herself overwhelmed. "Why are you so kind to me?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Dr. Trudy paused, setting aside the chart she had been reviewing. She met Gina's gaze, her eyes soft yet resolute. "Because you're our patient. And more importantly, you're human. We all bleed red, don't we?" The words struck deep, shattering the remnants of the wall Gina had built around her heart. Tears welled up, spilling over as silent sobs racked her frame. For years, she had clung to biases, to misconceptions passed down through generations. Yet here was a family, embodying the very virtues she had failed to see: compassion, kindness, and unconditional humanity. As the days turned into weeks, Gina's physical wounds began to heal, but it was the mending of her spirit that marked the true transformation. Conversations with the Thomases opened her eyes to the richness of their experiences, their struggles, and their triumphs. She learned of the challenges they faced in their professions, the biases they had to overcome, and the unwavering dedication they had to their community. Their stories painted a tapestry of resilience and strength, challenging every prejudice she had held. One afternoon, Mandy sat beside her, braiding a friendship bracelet with nimble fingers. "Miss Gina," she began hesitantly, "do you have any kids?" The question was innocent, yet it pierced Gina's heart. "I do," she replied softly. "A son. His name is Liam." Mandy's eyes lit up. "That's a nice name. Do you see him often?" Gina looked away, shame coloring her cheeks. "Not as often as I'd like." The child nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe when you get better, you can visit him. I'm sure he misses you." The simplicity of the statement belied its profound truth. In that moment, Gina realized the depth of the chasm she had created between herself and her son. And for what? Misguided beliefs and unfounded fears? Dr. Trudy informed Gina that they will be transferring her to another section of the hospital for physiotherapy. As her discharge date approached, Gina felt a mix of gratitude and apprehension. The hospital had become a cocoon of transformation, but the real world awaited, with all its complexities and challenges. On her last day, the Thomas family gathered in her room, their faces beaming. "We'll miss you," Gabriel said, handing her a small potted plant. "Something to brighten your home." Gina accepted it, tears threatening to spill once more. "I can't thank you enough," she murmured. "You've shown me so much." Dr. Trudy stepped forward, enveloping her in a warm embrace. "Remember, change starts from within. Embrace it." As Gina was being wheeled out of orthopedic section to the physio section, the cool breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers wafted across her face, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose. It was time to mend the bridges she had burned. Time to embrace the family she had nearly lost. Time to let love triumph over prejudice. It started with a pen. A simple pen, borrowed from the nurse's station and cradled awkwardly in Gina's stiff fingers. The paper was a wrinkled notepad someone had left by her bedside, a hospital pamphlet turned canvas for something far heavier than notes or reminders. Apology. The word circled her mind like a hawk, waiting to land. She hadn't spoken to Liam in over 2 years. Not since that day, the day of slammed doors, shouted ultimatums, and heartbreak so palpable it still echoed in her bones. But now? Now there were new voices in her mind. Trudy's calm compassion. Turner's warm reassurances. Mandy's innocent, unjudging kindness. All woven together, pulling Gina toward a precipice she'd avoided for far too long. She uncapped the pen. The ink trembled at first, just like her hands. Then, slowly, she began to write. Dear Liam, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't even know if I'll send it. But I need to say these words, even if only once. I'm sorry. Not just for that night. But for everything. For the way I made Claire feel. For the way I made you feel. For the hatred I let live in my heart for so long. I told myself it was about tradition, or values, or what's right. But the truth is, I was scared. Scared of change. Scared of what people would think. Scared of losing you. But I lost you anyway. And it wasn't because of Claire. It was because of me. You were right to walk away. I see that now. It took time, too much time, but I'm learning. Slowly, painfully. But I'm trying. I hope one day you can forgive me. Love always. Mom. She stared at the page for a long time, eyes blurring with unshed tears. It wasn't enough. It could never undo the damage. But it was something. Gina folded the letter neatly and placed it on her nightstand. Maybe, she whispered to the empty room. Just maybe. Recovery was slow. Brutally slow. The accident had done more damage than Gina expected. Fractures in her hip, bruising along her spine, nerve damage that made even sitting up a Herculean effort. She cursed her own body every morning. But beneath the frustration was something else. Determination. If nothing else, she wanted to heal. Physically, emotionally. Maybe even spiritually. You've got the best coming in today, the nurse said cheerily one morning. She's top in her field. A real miracle worker. Gina nodded, barely listening. Her focus was on the dull ache radiating from her hip, the way her leg refused to cooperate. We've been talking by phone, she said. She seems nice. The nurse smiled. You'll like her. She's amazing. The door opened. Gina turned toward it. And time stopped. The woman who entered was tall, poised, dressed in a navy blue therapist uniform. Her hair was tied back in a sleek bun, her features soft but confident. Their eyes met. Silence. Then, Gina's breath caught. Claire. The woman blinked. Mrs. Jones. A beat passed. Then realization dawned. You're Clarissa Jones? Gina whispered. Claire, Clarissa, nodded slowly. Yes. My full name is Clarissa. I married Liam. We moved here after the wedding. I didn't realize. They assigned me to you without mentioning your name. The air was thick, charged with something deeper than tension. I can request a replacement, Claire offered gently, her professional tone unwavering. If this makes you uncomfortable. Gina looked down at her motionless leg, at her trembling hands. You're the best, they said. Claire gave a small, measured nod. Gina inhaled shakily. Then, I suppose I don't have much of a choice. The words weren't warm, but they weren't cruel either. Just tired. Honest. Claire set her bag down beside the bed. I'll be gentle. And so, the sessions began. The first week was awkward. Claire maintained her professionalism, guiding Gina through the smallest of movements. Lifting a foot. Flexing a knee. Shifting weight. Her voice was patient, clear. Not cold, but distant. Polite. Gina obeyed, silently. Her face often twisted in pain, but she never asked for mercy. The silence between them stretched like a taut wire, neither ready to speak, to name what lay between them. Until one afternoon, when a simple question unraveled everything. So your surname is Jones too? Gina asked, panting after a grueling set of leg lifts. Claire paused. Yes. Liam and I had a funny moment at the courthouse when the official there noticed that we didn't need to change anything. We were already Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Gina let out a dry laugh. A real one. It surprised them both. Fate has a cruel sense of humor. Claire smiled faintly. Or maybe it has a poetic one. In the days that followed, something shifted. The exercises grew harder. Gina cursed under her breath more often. But she also asked questions. About Claire's work. About her life. Even, cautiously, about Liam. Claire didn't open up immediately, but she didn't shut Gina down either. Yes, she said one day, adjusting a resistance band, he's happy. He's thriving. Gina nodded. I saw the wedding pictures. Claire looked at her carefully. I wasn't invited, Gina added. Not that I blame you. Claire said nothing. Then, softly, we didn't want to reopen wounds. We thought you wouldn't come. You were right. Silence again. But not as sharp this time. More like a shared weight, slowly being set down between them. By the end of the second week, Gina was walking with a walker. Slow steps. But upright. Her shoulders straighter. Her spirit too. Claire handed her a towel after their session. Progress looks good, she said. You'll be on your feet fully in another few weeks. Gina nodded. Then reached into her nightstand. She pulled out the letter. Would you, she hesitated, voice cracking. Would you give this to him? Claire took it, surprised. You wrote this. Long ago, Gina said. But I never had the courage. Until now. Claire studied her, then carefully folded the letter and placed it in her bag. I'll make sure he gets it. And for the first time in years, Gina exhaled. Fully. Freely. The rehabilitation room was bathed in the soft glow of the afternoon sun, casting elongated shadows that mirrored Gina's journey, stretching from a past filled with regret to a future uncertain yet hopeful. Claire stood beside her, a steady presence, guiding her through each movement with a blend of professionalism and genuine care. Gina attempted a step forward, her legs quivering under the weight of both physical strain and emotional turmoil. She stumbled slightly, frustration etching lines deeper into her already weary face. I'm old and broken, Gina muttered, her voice laced with self-reproach. Claire's response was gentle yet firm, her eyes meeting Gina's with unwavering sincerity. No. You're healing. The words hung in the air, a testament to the transformative power of empathy and understanding. Their sessions continued, each meeting peeling back layers of guardedness, revealing glimpses of vulnerability and the potential for redemption. One afternoon, as the rhythmic cadence of their exercises filled the room, Gina broke the silence with a question that had been gnawing at her conscience. Why didn't you hate me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Claire paused, considering the weight of the inquiry. Because Liam loves you, she began, her tone measured. I have autonomy. I can choose love or hate, and I choose love too. The simplicity of the statement belied its profound depth. Gina's composure crumbled, tears streaming down her face as the magnitude of her past actions bore down upon her. I was wrong. So wrong, she confessed, the words a cathartic release of pent-up guilt and sorrow. Claire reached out, placing a comforting hand over Gina's. Let's move forward, she urged, embodying the grace that had become the cornerstone of their evolving relationship. Gina hesitated before voicing her next request, her vulnerability laid bare. Did you give Liam my letter? Claire nodded her head gently. Yes. But he said he was reluctant to open it. I didn't push. I felt it was important to respect the boundaries he set. A moment of contemplation passed before Gina spoke again. Would you tell him? Ask him to visit? I want to see my son. Claire nodded, understanding the significance of the request. I'll let him know. The day arrived with a palpable sense of anticipation. Gina sat in the hospital's communal garden, the vibrant blooms a stark contrast to the turmoil within her. Claire stood nearby, offering silent support as they awaited Liam's arrival. The crunch of footsteps on the gravel path drew Gina's attention. She looked up to see Liam approaching, his expression a mixture of apprehension and concern. His gaze fell upon his mother, standing with the aid of a walker, determination evident in her stance. Mom, Liam breathed, the single syllable carrying years of unspoken emotions. Gina's eyes welled with tears as she took a tentative step forward. "I've missed you, my son," she said, her voice trembling. Without hesitation, Liam closed the distance, enveloping his mother in a heartfelt embrace. The barriers erected by years of estrangement crumbled, replaced by the warmth of renewed connection. After a moment, Liam brought out the letter that Gina had sent through Claire to him. He knew it was okay to read it, that his mom had changed. He unfolded the paper, his eyes scanning the handwritten words. As he read, tears traced paths down his cheeks, the emotional gravity of his mother's apology resonating deeply. "I forgive you, Mom," he whispered, the declaration sealing the rift that had kept them apart for years. Claire observed the reunion with a soft smile, her heart swelling with love and hope for the family's future. That evening, they invited Gina to their home for the first time. As Liam wheeled her into their dining room, where they had set the table so beautifully, they gathered around a dinner table for the first time in years. Laughter mingled with the clinking of cutlery, the atmosphere imbued with genuine warmth and the promise of new beginnings. As the night drew to a close, Gina reached across the table, her hand covering Claire's. "Thank you," she said, gratitude shining in her eyes. Claire squeezed her hand gently. "Family chooses love," she replied, echoing the sentiment that had guided them to this moment. And so, the journey of healing continued, each step forward a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of forgiveness. Months after reconciling with her son and daughter-in-law, Gina found herself standing before a packed town hall, the weight of her journey pressing heavily upon her heart. The room was silent, all eyes fixed on her as she took a deep breath, ready to bare her soul. "I stand before you today," she began, her voice steady yet tinged with emotion, "to share a chapter of my life I'm not proud of, but one that has taught me invaluable lessons. I disowned my son because of the color of love." She paused, allowing her words to resonate. The audience remained attentive, some nodding in understanding, others with tears brimming. "In my darkest hour," Gina continued, "after an accident left me vulnerable and alone, a family I once viewed through a lens of bias extended their hands to me. The Thomases, with their boundless compassion, showed me the true essence of humanity. Dr. Trudy Thomas, an orthopedic and trauma surgeon, not only healed my physical wounds but also mended the fractures within my spirit. Their children treated me with kindness that I had not earned, teaching me that love knows no boundaries." She took a moment to collect herself, the memories evoking a swirl of emotions. "And then there was Clarissa, my son's wife, whom I had wronged deeply. Despite the pain I caused, she chose to guide me through my rehabilitation with unwavering professionalism and grace. When I faltered, she reminded me, 'You're healing.' Her strength became my pillar, her forgiveness a beacon leading me out of the darkness." Gina's gaze swept across the room, meeting the eyes of those present. "Racism," she said, her voice firm, "almost destroyed my family. But love rebuilt it. I implore you all, don't wait until it's too late. You see, my prejudice blinded me, leading me to miss some of the most important moments of my son's life that I can never reclaim. And that is my biggest regret. Was it worth it? Most definitely not. Don't be me," Gina said slowly and quietly. "See the soul, not the skin. Embrace the humanity in each other. And as a wise doctor once told me, we all bleed red after all." The room erupted in applause, not just for Gina's courage to confront her past, but for the hope her story instilled in others. In that moment, Gina knew her journey had come full circle, not just for herself, but as a testament to the transformative power of love and understanding. Here are some questions for you, our viewers. Have you ever let prejudice or fear stop you from truly knowing someone? What did it cost you? Do you believe people can change once they confront their own biases? Why or why not? What does seeing the soul, not the skin mean to you, and how can we practice that in our daily lives? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming stories.